My service was the Army.
U.S. Army.
United States Army.
Specialist for
Navy.
And the U.S. Navy.
Navy Petty Officer.
U.S. Navy.
United States Air Force.
In the Air Force.
United States Marine Corps.
USMC.
United States Marine Corps.
United States Marine Corps.
Let's talk a little bit about the Vietnam experience then.
Well, I don't know how this sounds, but I couldn't wait to get there. I had wanted to be a fighter pilot all my life, from a very little kid, and I was excited about the possibilities of helping my nation win that war.
My initial reaction, I don't know, I was proud to do it, and I'm still proud to have served.
I was nervous because a lot of the Vietnam War was on television all the time, and you saw the number of casualties every day. And
so I basically feared engagement with the enemy. I think all of us, certainly in being teenagers and being in a war situation, possible, death, personal injury.
At first, you're very leery, afraid, terrified, unsure what's going to happen, but you settle in like any other job.
When I got back to the barracks on the weekend, laying on my bunk was a publication which I gather a lot of guys wound up getting, The Marine's Guide to Vietnam. I knew what happened. They had asked for somebody with my MOS, military occupational specialty. And since I was the new guy still, I was chosen.
Well, the thing was I knew that Vietnam was happening. And I signed the papers to go into the Marine Corps on March the 10th, 1967. I was still in high school. And the Marine Corps surprised me because they said, "Oh, we have a buddy plan." I said, "Really? What's that mean?" He says, "Well, you can have some of your buddies go with you if they join the Marine Corps and go to boot camp with you, AIT training together, jungle training together," because I knew we were going to go to Vietnam. So I went back to school. I convinced 5 of my buddies to join the Marine Corps with me. We went to boot camp together, and when we got to boot camp, all my buddies kept asking me, said, "Jerry, what in the heck have you got us into?" I said, "I don't know. This is my first time here too." I was in the 1st Marine Division, Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, my first tour. I did 2 tours in Vietnam. In that first tour of duty in Vietnam, all 5 of my buddies were killed. And so I had been wounded twice then, and I went back to Vietnam as a scout sniper. And I got some payback from my friends, from my buddies. And I'm credited right now with 62 confirms. So every time I took one, I logged it in my book under each one of my buddies' names as payback for that.
As a 25-year-old, it was quite an experience to go to a different culture, a different situation, obviously a war zone. In Vietnam, it was something that the war was all around you. There weren't defined fronts that you could say, I'm safe versus not safe.
Da Nang is a deep water port, but there's still dangers there. As we were going in, there was a ship, vertical, going down. American or non-American, I don't know. It was white. It was halfway submerged vertically. So what had happened was there are commandos from the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, that had swam out underwater, attached the mines to the craft, and blew it. So when we were pulling up to the pier with LPH-11 helicopter carrier, full battalion of Marines, load of helicopters, different types, all the stores, we could only stay there for 2 hours. And we could not anchor off like we normally do, connect shore power, things like that. We were still running. You couldn't stick around because the possibility of you being mined was real.
The life over there was, we had old sea rations from World War II or Korea even, And those were our rations for every day. It had little cans that you would heat up with the C4 you had, and you'd heat that up, and it had all kinds of different, what they called meals. Also, they had another smaller can that was a pound cake. That was your dessert. But that was only once every couple of weeks. We never really got into a place where we could actually get a hot meal.
Like I said, a guided missile destroyer. It was pretty much, how do I want to say this? It was a gunship, ready to go. And being from Mason, not knowing anything about the Navy, it was a shell shocker. Aboard a destroyer, you don't have the luxuries that you do on the bigger ships, the aircraft carriers, the crews and everything. So my whole life was in a locker this big, this wide. All my uniforms, no civilian clothes. So all my uniforms, everything, that was my life. 300 and somewhere around 350 men aboard ship, and it was a shell shocker, but I was ready to go.
Well, there is really nothing in life quite matches flying a single-seat jet fighter, and to do so in combat is highly stressful. It's adrenaline drenched. There are highs like you've never had before, and there are some lows like you've probably never had before. My primary mission was close air support, helping the Army, and we would be called in when things were really looking tough for the Army and the enemy was coming over the fence, and we were there to rescue them. And we were allowed to drop our ordnance, our bombs, and fire our guns within 50 feet of friendly troops. So it was, the stress part was that was very close, and you really didn't want to miss and kill a good guy. At the same time, rescuing American soldiers from what looked like certain death to them is like no other kind of job satisfaction you can imagine.
Coming back to the States was not good. I would rather have stayed in combat than go through. I came in San Francisco, and it was tense, to say the least. You felt safer in Vietnam under combat conditions than you did in San Francisco. So you just not wear or have any thing to indicate that you were in the military when you were in San Francisco at that time.
When I flew back home, after getting out, they had protesters out there right in front of the terminal. And they were just laughing and calling us baby killers. Wasn't our war, we didn't need to be there. And so as I was walking up to the terminal, they had signs out there, and this one guy happened to be throwing something up in the air, catching it. And I thought it was a ball. And so I said, let me just glance over there and see what that is that he's tossing up and down. So I looked to my left, and just as I looked to my left, smack, big giant rotten tomato. I laid my bag down right there where I was standing. I'm looking at my uniform, and it's got tomato juice and stuff all over it. So I walked over to this guy, and I got within 3 fingers of his face. And I said to him, "Is that all you got?" And he started laughing. And when he laughed, one punch, I knocked him out cold, down to the ground.
Those who knew that I had served, including some teachers, would be hesitant to not only be around me, but be very critical. So I try to keep a low profile a lot of the times. I wouldn't necessarily wear my Marine field jacket or a Marine cap because that was a trigger for the young people back then who were anti-Vietnam, anti-war, They didn't quite understand why I did things, and probably still don't understand why I did things.
That was bad. People just didn't care, called you names, and I had to start looking for work and stuff, and you go to employers and they'd ask you, well, what have you done in the last, and you tell them, and then they just blow you off, turn you away, like, you scum, get out of here,
I came out with a lot of pride. Society took that away from a lot of us veterans, that we couldn't, there was no bragging, no bragging rights. It was like, they dismissed you, like, oh yeah, you're another one of them baby killers and all that stuff. You had to live through it.
People's reaction to me and other veterans, I think, was mixed. Some protested, viewing veterans as a symbol of this unpopular war, and others showed total indifference, disdain. The level of disrespect and the lack of recognition was just overwhelming.
My returning was beyond description. I didn't want to come home. I literally very seriously thought about staying. In fact, I think I did stay a day too long, where I didn't want to come home to the media and the bad news and the protesting and people asking questions or people not asking questions. I mean, it was one of these fears to where I had adapted so well to my environment. I had no electricity, no running water, no toilet for 397 days. I was used to that. And it was simple. I kept it simple. And so coming home just seemed too complicated and too much drama and emotion attached. And actually, as it turned out, it was far worse. I mean, to me, was the fact that nobody said anything. Here, my dad's a full colonel, never asked me a question. My wife never asked me a single question. My employer, my friends, it was like they just, and I can't blame them, but so they must have felt like, oh, well, he won't want to talk about it, whereas to me, not talking about it made me feel all the more guilty.
When we came back, there was no welcome home. There was no thank you for your service. Nobody wanted to talk about Vietnam. And I got a job and I worked at a company and I spent 30 years there and retired. And nobody ever knew I served.
I felt unsupported, and it's increased my emotional scars. I'm somewhat ashamed. I later hid being in service and didn't let other people know that I was ever in Vietnam, because I figured that if they knew that and my being an African American, it would make matters worse for me.
It took me 25 years before I could even talk about my time in Vietnam, and all the friends that I had back in Sydney, nobody talked about it. It was one of those things where you weren't ashamed of it and you were proud you were doing your part, but you just didn't talk about it. You have to get out and talk to people and share your story so that they understand that they're not alone out there.
But I can't explain the horror of war any clearer than that it's hell. It's pure hell. It's something I wouldn't wish on anybody.
My negative part about it is just that we could have won the war a lot sooner and saved a lot of lives. I think we lost about 56,000 people there, and that's way too many.
I think I left off with North SAR Station. We were way up north, off the coast of Haiphong. Navy pilots would leave the carrier, go do their thing, bombing Haiphong, Hanoi. The Navy pilots, they liked us out there. We were out there to pick them up. And also there was the Red Chinese fishing fleet flying the Red Chinese flag, who we didn't have any. They were flying the Red Chinese flag, so it was off limits to us. Navy pilot went down and we went to get him, but they got to him before we did. And we had to turn around and go home, or go back south, not home. And that was a bad day, really a bad day, because we knew he was there and we couldn't do nothing. We couldn't do nothing. And we had the horsepower, we had the firepower. We could have got him, but because they were flying a red Chinese flag, yeah, he's gone. And that's what I didn't like about the Vietnam War. There was too much politics. When that thing started, it could have been over in a real short time. I mean, politics should have stayed out of it. And then after I read more about it, we shouldn't even been there. That's just my opinion. 58,000 wasted lives.
I'm not sure what the public understands. I know that an awful lot of what was being broadcast over the media in those days was not anything like what was going on over there. I do know that we won every battle. That war was lost in Washington, D.C., but our soldiers, with our help in the air, did all that their country asked of them, and they won their wars, but the big war was lost in Washington, D.C.
You know, I don't know if I agree 100% with that war, but somebody's got to do it, and it was my turn, so I did it. People had to do the job, and they did it, you know what I mean?
About 20 years later, I was in Washington at the Vietnam Memorial, trying to eat my way through it, and this guy comes up to me, and he says, "Hey, you don't know me, but I know you, and I've got one thing to say to you." I'm like, oh boy, you know, this is bringing all the memories back. He says, "I'm that spit on you in San Francisco, and I just need to say, I'm sorry." Well, that was kind of a turning point for me in coming back. There was I had a lot of resentment of how I was received when I came back. And the guy actually coming up saying, you know, "I remember you and I need to apologize." That was big. There were experiences there I would not trade. I made a lot of good friends in the military. It's still a family. You know, I can walk into any base or anything and the people there will treat us just like we never left.
You know, I wouldn't change it for the world, and wouldn't necessarily recommend it for anybody, but I would recommend they consider it.
There's not been a situation or a job opportunity that came up that I thought I could not handle, because I felt like I had maybe handled just about all that life could throw at me in combat.
If I hadn't had the experience of the Marines, I think I would have gone the route of many of the kids in my neighborhood who went to prison or who were killed. But the Marine Corps took me out of poverty, and it really gave me a sense of finding the person that I am today.
So it doesn't matter what branch you go into, but the pride comes when you know that you are serving your country.